What is going on, guys? In today's video I will show you the top 3 best warrior builds in part of Exile 2. In this guide I will give you a quick overview of the best setups for both ascendancies, so Warbringer and the Titan. Then I will explain what skill gems and upgrades should you focus on. Then as well we'll see what is the best gear and how to get it for both the mid game and end game. And then finally we will go over the passive tree, attributes, your skill rotations, and even what Atlas passive should you use, so we would be able to get the highest damage possible and much more. If you are looking for any of these builds on the website, then click my link in this video description or the pinned comment. This setup's main focus is to run and press from 1 to 2 skills and then target big enemy groups to then weaken them and explode. One of the most powerful skills that we have in our arsenal is the Shockwave totem, and as you can see from the gameplay, we are just running into the enemies and one-shotting them without even trying. Also, our ancestral warrior totem and the scavenge plating makes the most out of this by effectively extending the damage of this hit many times over, in order to kill big targets like the bosses or tanky rare monsters. Of course, like most melee builds, the armor explosion was nerfed, but our particular setup wasn't impacted as much as other melee builds, so currently this is by far one of the best warrior builds in the game. If you are looking for a powerful auto AoV machine to target enemies and delete them in split seconds, then this is the one for you. So let me show you the build, and for the main class I have chosen to go with the warrior, and our ascendancy is the Warbringer. Then for the first skill we have the Mage Strike with the support gem called the Rage, Armor Explosion, Magnified Effect, and the Primal Armament. And even after the new changes on how the armor breaker works, the Mage Strike still works perfectly fine, as long as you use it with the cultist Great Hammer. Then second we got the Shockwave totem with Inspiration, Close Combat, and Overpower. Then next we got the Scavenge plating with the Precision, Vitality, and Clarity. Next we have the Ancestral Warrior totem with the Sunder, Super Critical, and Overabundance. Next up we have the Time of the Need with Fast Forward, Herbalism, and Clarity. And finally, for the last one we are using the Hammer of the Gods with Fist of War, Concentrated Effect, Exploit Weakness, and Heft. Most of this setup is structured around using the Shockwave totem and the Mage Strike to delete enemies in split seconds, so we use gems and skills that will support and increase their size and damage, while the rest are powerful buffs and utility skills that usually get activated in the background. And as our build is already super broken, so we don't have to use more than these 6 active skill gems. Next up we have our passive tree, and if you're interested in a full in-depth guide on how it works, then check out my beginner guide. So let's take a look at our setup, and we want to start at this melee damage node, and then go like this until we get all of these 4. So Brutal, Smash, Sturdy Metal, and Relentless. Then next up we want to go to this top right side like this, and then go to the left until we get this whole thing, so Ancestral Reach and the Supportive Ancestors. Next we circle back a little, and this time keep going until we reach the Devastation node. Then next up we keep going and take the right side, and then keep going more until we get both of these, so Carving Earth and Hardened Wood. Then now keep moving forwards until the end, and from here we want to get both of these totem nodes. Which side you choose first doesn't really matter as long as you get both of them. And then finally from this point and onwards you can unlock the rest of the nodes in whatever order you prefer. All of these nodes that we got are very useful, but the ones I mentioned have the top priority as they're the most important ones to acquire early on in the game, to make our build functional, and then in the late game to make it even more powerful. Also, as far as attributes go, you just simply want to fulfill your attribute requirements to gear and skill gems, and then spend the rest of your leftover attributes into more strength. And then now let's go all the way to the middle again, and for our Ascendancy build this is what we have. So at the beginning you want to unlock the Anvil's Weight, then second get the Imploding Impacts, then third we want the Answered Call, and then finally for the fourth option go with the Wooden Wall. Next up we have our Atlas passives, and the general idea behind this is to aim for bonus stats that spawn a lot of grouped up monsters, such as in expeditions or in rituals. Our warrior build is also great at single target DPS, so we can also spend a bit points into farming boss maps or essences. So when we start we want to first of all get to this bottom right side like this. Then from here we want to go until we get all the way to this keystone called the Deadly Evolution. Then next we go back to the middle, and this time take the bottom left side and get all of these passives. And then when all of these are done, then now we go again to the middle and now take the middle path and unlock the rest of the nodes in whatever order you prefer. Next we have our gear. The weapon of our choice is the Cultist Great Hammer, which is special, because its base stat does that our strike now deals splash damage to the targets within 1.8 meter range. And as I said, after the new changes to how the armor breaker works, the mace strike will now still work perfectly fine, but you specifically have to use this weapon, or otherwise switch the mace strike skill for something different like the Stampede. And then for bonus stats we want increased physical damage, more armor, and more levels of all melee skills. Then for the helmet we have the Warrior Great Helm with armor. And for more we want max life, more accuracy, more intelligence, and fire resistance. Then for chest we have the advanced full plate with armor. And for more we need max life, armor, and cold resistance. Then for the belt we have the Rawhide belt with 20% quicker flask recovery. And for bonus stats we want max life, more armor, and +2 to charm slots. Then for gloves we got the Interested gloves with energy shield. And for more we need max life, max mana, and more levels to all melee skills. Then for boots we are using the advanced bronze greaves with armor. And for more we for sure want increased movement speed, and then also max life and resistances like cold and fire. Then for our first ring we got the ruby ring with fire resistance. And for more we'd want add physical damage, more intelligence, and lightning resistance. While on the second one we have the topaz ring with lightning resistance. And for more we need max life, max mana, more strength, and chaos resistance. And then finally for the amulet we got the crimson amulet with life regen per second. And for more we want max life, more armor, more dexterity, and fire resistance. No matter which gear you choose, just at least try to get 75% resistance cap on all 4 elements. This is a starter setup, which should be more of an example of what stats and prefixes to look for. Then next we have runes. And now finally, let's quickly take a look at how this build will work. And to be honest, because of our setup, this build will be extremely powerful, no matter in what order you use your skills. But if you're interested in the most optimized damage rotation, then here it is. So for both clearing and bossing, you want to place down your Shockwave totem, and Ancestral Warrior, which is linked with the Sunder totem. And then you can also use the Mace Strike to get a bit of extra damage in, and then later to generate Rage as well. And finally, when you are at high tier maps and at the full endgame, you'll also be wanting to use the Hammer of the Gods on stunned bosses. But since it relies on having more than just plus levels to all melee skills on your weapon, so it might not deal as much damage for you as it does for other builds. And that's why our main objective will be to focusing on crazy AoE damage and less at single targets. This setup's main focus is to scale Ignite from our attacks and target big enemy groups, to then set them on fire and explode. And one of the most powerful skills that we have in our arsenal is the Hammer of the Gods, which does incredible amount of single target damage with no element penalty. So Ignite makes the most out of this, by effectively extending the damage of this hit many times over, in order to destroy big targets like the bosses or tanky rare monsters. Ignite effect does damage based on the size of the hit that has been generated. And of course, like most melee builds, the armor explosion was nerfed. But as our main focus is on fire, so our particular setup was not impacted as much as other melee builds. And currently, this is by far the best warrior build in the game. If you are looking for a powerful single target and AoE fire build, then this is the one for you. So let me show you the build, and for the main class I have chosen to go with the warrior, and our ascendancy is the Titan. Then for the first skill we have the Hammer of the Gods with support gems such as the Heft, Fire Infusion, and the Primal Armament. Then second we got the Leap Slam with the Jagged Ground, Holy Descent, and Fire Exposure. Then next we got the Bone Shatter with the Impact Shockwave, Execute, and Eternal Flame. Next we have the Perfect Strike with the Window of Opportunity, Martial Tempo, and the Fire Penetration. Next up we have the Infernal Cry with Premeditation, Corrupting Cry, and the Dazing Cry. Then for one of the last ones we got the Seismic Cry with just the Enraged War Cry. Next we have the Stampede with the Aftershock, Momentum, and the Magnified Effect. Next up we also got the Herald of the Ash with Vitality, Clarity, and the Fire Mastery. And finally, for our last one, we have the Overwhelming Presence with Cannibalism and the Herbalism. Next up we have our passive tree, and if you're interested in a full in-depth guide on how it works, then check out my beginner guides. So let's take a look at our setup, and we want to start at this melee damage node. Then go like this until we get the Brutal and the Smash nodes. Then from here we want to go up top a bit, and then get this Burn away. Now we go from where we left off and keep going until the burning strikes. Then now we again keep going like this until we get to this point, and then go down a bit to the Beef node, and also you want to get all of these small nodes around them. Next up, let's go back to the main path and keep going all the way to the end. And where the path splits, we first of all want to go to the right and take this big keystone called the Avatar of Fire, and also grab these two notable nodes called the Overheating Blow and the Fulmination. Next, let's go back and this time take the left and unlock the second keystone called the Giant's Blood, which will enable us to wield a two-handed weapon in just one hand, so we can also use a shield on our offhand. And then finally, from this point and onwards, you can unlock the rest of the nodes in whatever order you prefer. All of these nodes that we got are really good, but the ones I mentioned have the top priority, as they're the most important ones to acquire early on in the game, to make our build functional, and then in the late game to make it even more powerful. Also, as far as attributes go, you just simply want to fulfill your attribute requirements for gear and the skill gems, and then after that spend the rest of your leftover attributes into more strength. And then now let's go all the way to the middle again, and for our Ascendancy build, this is what we have. So at the beginning you want to unlock the Colossal Capacity, then second get the Hulking Form, then next we want to get the Airbreaker, and then finally for our fourth Ascendancy select the Mysterious Lineage, to give ourselves a bit more defense. Next up we have our Atlas passives, and the general idea behind this is to aim for bonus passives that spawn a lot of grouped up monsters, such as in expeditions or in rituals. Our Fire Warrior build also is great at single target DPS, so we can also spend a bit points into the farming boss maps or the essences. So when we start, we wanna first of all get to this bottom right side like this. Then from here we go like this until we get all the way to the keystone called the Deadly Evolution. And then when all of these passives are done, then now we go to the middle and now take the middle path and unlock the rest of the nodes in whatever order you prefer. Then next we have our gear. The weapon of our choice is the Expert Forge Maul with the critical chance and the weapon speed. And for bonus stats, we want increased fire damage, increased physical damage, more accuracy, more strength, and leech percentages dealt of physical damage as mana. Next we also have the offhand called the Expert Brace Tower Shield. And for bonus stats, we want increased block chance, more armor, and resistances like fire and cold. Then for helmet we have the Expert Soldier Great Helm with armor, and for more we want increased max life, more to armor, more strength, and chaos resistance. Then for chest we have the Advanced Iron Cuirass with armor, and for more we need max life, more armor, lightning resistance, and more to strength. Then for the belt we have the Plate Belt with armor, max life, increased even more armor, and chaos resistance. Then for gloves we got the Expert Riveted Mitts with armor, and for more we need max life, increased armor, and resistances like fire and lightning. Then for boots we're using the Expert Trim Greaves with armor, and for bonus stats we need as much increased movement speed as possible, and also more armor and resistances like cold and chaos. Then for our first ring we got the Prismatic Ring with plus percentage to all elemental resistances, and for bonus stats we need increased fire damage, percentage to all elemental resistances, and cold resistance. While on the second one we got the Ruby Ring with fire resistance, and for more we want to go with max life, increased armor, and chaos resistance. And then finally for the amulet we got the Gold Amulet with increased rarity found of the items, and for extras we got more to spirit and more to strength. No matter which gear you choose, just at least try to get 75% resistance cap, and keep in mind that this is just a starter setup, which should be more of an example of what stats and prefixes to look for. And now finally, let's quickly take a look at how this build will work. So our first AoE rotation is pretty straightforward, and you want to start by using the Stampede into the pack of enemies. Then use the Bone Shatter to clear up remaining targets that are primed for a stun. You can also use the Leap Slam as a mobility skill, or to prime remaining enemies and then activate the Bone Shatter. Or then the second rotation is for bosses, and when fighting single targets, so you want to use the Perfect Strike to heavy stun them. Then once the boss is heavy stunned, then cast the War Cry, Seismic Cry, Hammer of the Gods, and then the Perfect Strike for massive amounts of damage. And then from here just keep our shouts and the Perfect Cry up, until the Hammer of the Gods refresh is needed. And then from here just rinse and repeat. This setup is a big AoE build which focuses on armor breaking offensively, and then the block defensively. Our main playstyle will revolve around using the Stampede skill, which will charge our character forwards and create patches of jagged ground, which then are exploded when the final slam portion of the ability is executed. By us using the Ancestral Warrior Totem skill with the Jagged Ground support gem, this will create now 2 patches of the jagged ground per each use, and will also be exploded by the Stampede. So we will be able to basically one-shot huge amount of grouped up enemies. Then also for leveling and mid-game, we are going to be using a 2-handed mace, and taking the Anvil's weight and the imploding impacts for the first 2 ascensions. While then later, when we have enough strength, we will invest into the Giant's Blood Keystone, which will unlock the ability for us to use a 2-handed weapon in just one hand, so then we can use a shield on our rough hand. So with all of this said, let me show you the build. For main class, we have chosen the Warrior, and our ascendancy is the Warbringer. And then for our basic skill, we got the Mace Strike with support gems such as the Rage, Close Combat and Maim. Then second, we got our most important skill, the Stampede, with support gems like the Momentum, Fist of War, Brutality and Stomping Ground. Then next we got the Leap Slam with Martial Tempo, Holy Descent and Culling Strike. Then next we have the Ancestral Warrior Totem with the Rolling Slam, Jagged Ground, Ancestral Urgency and Heavy Swing. Next we have the Scavenge Planting with the Vitality and the Cannibalism. Then next we have the Hammer of the Gods with the Second Wind, Hourglass, Execute and the Concentrated Effect. Then next we got the Seismic Cry with just one support gem, the Premeditation. And finally for the last one we got Attrition with no gems. Next we have our passive skill tree. For most new players this can seem extremely daunting, but actually it's quite simple. In extremely simple terms, every character is granted one passive skill point every time they level up, and are sometimes even granted more from completing certain quests. In general we have 3 node types, so small nodes, notable nodes and the keystones. All of them will act as checkpoints that you want to reach and make a path to build around a specific playstyle. So let's take a look at our setup, and we want to start at the melee damage node and make our path like this until the brutal node. Then next we take smash and make our way to the singular purpose like this. Then now we go back and take relentless for early game recovery, and then from here we again go back to previously where we left off and keep going forwards and then take the right path until we get to the resolute technique. Then now we go back where our paths split, and then we take the right side and make our way all the way to the Hail Heart. Also, while we are doing this, on our way we can grab the Spike Pit. And then from here, after you get your first ascension into the Anvil's Weight, then now you can begin filling out all the other armor break nodes and all the other nodes that you can see in this tree. And from here there's no specific priority that you should follow. And then finally, let's go back all the way to the middle again, and for our ascension setup this is what we have. So at the beginning you want to unlock the Anvil's Weight, then get Imploding Impacts, then now get the Renleigh Training, and then for the last one take the Turtle Charm. To simplify my decision making and so you could easier understand, then we wanted to prioritize the Brutal, Smash and the Singular Purpose nodes, as this will give us the biggest build upgrade, so we wanted to get them first. And then for the rest we wanted to invest into more recovery, more defense, and just more damage, which will make our character extremely powerful. In PoE 2, earning skill points take a lot of hard work, so it will be wise not to spend your skill points recklessly. You can of course refund your passive points later, but only at a cost, so following a specific setup is extremely useful. If you're following this setup, then make sure not to deviate from it, as some of my decisions that I make might not make sense at first, but is going to definitely pay off later. So please use the exact same path as I have right here, and don't forget to check this video's description to find the link for this website, and this should make it easier to follow the path. Next we have our gear. The weapon of our choice is the Expert Forge Maul with the critical and speed. And this is not required, but you can also, if you want, get the extra stats like the added flat physical damage, increased percentage to the physical damage and increased attack speed. Then for the helmet we have the Advanced Elite Great Helm with armor, and for the extra stats we want to get the max life, max strength and cold resistance. Then for chest we have the Abyssal Cuirass with the armor, and for the extra stats we want to get max life, more strength and fire resistance. Then for the belt we have the Fine Belt with the Flash Gain or 0.2 charges per second. And for the extra stats we want to get the max life, more strength and cold resistance. Then for gloves we got the Advanced Tempered Mitts with armor, and for the extra stats we want to get the max life, more armor, more to all attributes and cold resistance. Then for boots we are using the Expert Stone Greaves with armor, and for extra stats we want to get the max life, increased movement speed and the lightning resistance. Then for our first ring, we got the ruby ring with the fire resistance, and for extra stats we want to get the max life, more strength or just more resistances to all elements. While on the second one we got the sapphire ring with cold resistance, and the extra stats are max life, more to all attributes, and more percentage to all elemental resistances. And then finally for the amulet we got the Ember amulet with more strength, more max life and fire resistance. As the game just launched, so this is the starter setup, which should be more of an example of what stats and prefixes to look for. But remember that your weapon will be the most important upgrade, so prioritize flat added physical damage, percentage increased physical damage, and percentage increase to attack speed. Specifically, the physical damage roll will be the most important one, as your skills themselves do a lot of conversion. And then for defenses, make sure you're regularly updating the base type of your gear, so prioritize pure armor base types, and look for a combination of modifiers for life, resistances, and strength. Also, movement speed on boots is a good option as well. And now finally, let's quickly take a look at how this build will work. So, we want to start our main rotation by using the Stampede, which will create patches of the jagged ground, which are exploded when the final slam portion of the ability is executed. Then after that we use the Ancestral Warrior Totem, which will create now 2 jagged grounds. And then finally we use the Rolling Slam, which will also explode the Stampede and do massive amounts of AoE damage. Then from here we can use the Leap Slam to reposition and get great recovery because of the Holy Descendant support gem. Then the Hammer of the God skill is our finisher for tankier targets, so use it when the boss is at or below 35% HP, so we could benefit from the Execute support gem. And by the way, if you don't have enough spirit to maintain the Scavenge Planting and the Attrition, then feel free to use the Scavenge Planting during the general gameplay and deactivate it to then activate the Attrition for only against bosses. As you can see, this rotation is pretty straightforward. All you need to do is basically keep spamming the main rotation and use the rest of the filler skills for bosses or depending on the specific fight. So let me know what you think about this setup in the comments below. Now, if you enjoyed this video, then you definitely don't want to miss out my previous build guide, where I showed you even more powerful builds and much more.